Bonjour and good morning. Welcome to WASA Distance Education Center and PLAR Science. So we're into the second class for week 8. Sorry, yeah, that's right. We're on week 8. We only have this week, and then last week is our last week of classes. Then the week of January 27th to the 31st, that is what we have for admin week. And during admin week, there are no classes. And then after that week, we have Term 2A. So Term 2A will begin February 3rd until April 11th. So if you would like to sign up, what you need is you need to contact your local DEC, or you can contact Mary for PLAR or Michelle. You can also use our online WASA sign up. Now, when you use the WASA sign up, if you don't have a phone number or card information, you can just enter zeros in the required fields, and then it will let you continue to apply for a course. So all students are welcome to join the Radio Zoom classes. So for Term 2A Radio Zoom timetable, we have PLAR English and PLAR History Geography. So Bonnie will teach Mondays and Wednesdays for the PLAR English. Tuesdays and Thursdays will be the PLAR History Geography. 11 to 12 in the morning, that will be the GPP 3.0. And then from 2 to 3, we have LNOAO, so that's native language, with IRA. And then 3 to 4, we have NBE 3C. And then NBV 3E from 4 to 5. So if you are a student taking the other courses, or so for example, if you're still taking the OLC 4.0, here I'll show it to you here. So if you're taking the grade 12 English literacy course, even though it's not on the Radio Zoom timetable for 2A, you can still watch the classes on our WASA Distance Education Center YouTube. And if you don't have access to Wi-Fi or internet, you can ask for the classes to be downloaded on a flash drive. Okay, so OLC 4.0 is there. Let's say you didn't finish your MAP 4C, you can still watch the classes on YouTube. Co-op is there, the PLAR Geography, that was the Term 1A. The grade 12 College Prep is still on there as well. So again, if you don't finish what you have started in 1A or 1B, don't panic, you can still have access to the classes on our YouTube channel. So each course will have its own playlist where the broadcasted lessons can be accessed. Okay, let's continue on here. So students, like I said, can still register for independent learning IL courses. So if you don't see the course that you want on the Radio Zoom timetable, check out our IL courses. So if it's there, then you can apply for it. You have to complete it though on or before June 13th, 2025. Also, WASA will keep running the 2 student draws. So you get one for earning a credit, and you get another one for submitting work. So make sure to submit your work to your teacher so that your name will be entered. If you're working on multiple courses, your name will be entered once for each subject where you submit work. So it's very important that you contact your teacher. So contact me if you're needing help with your PLAR history, geography, or science. My office number is 1-800-667-3703. This is toll free. Extension is 2204. There's a toll-free fax. My email is there, my Facebook. So you can message me regarding your schoolwork under my profile name, J. Mercer WASA. My office hours schedule is available from your DEC, or you can contact me if you'd like to know when my office hours are, and you may also call me at home. Several options to submit your key questions or culminating. You can have your DEC fax it for you, scan email to studentwork@nnec.on.ca. Make sure you CC the teacher that's marking your work. So again, history, geography, science, make sure you CC me. English and math, make sure you CC Bonnie. You can also use your Notes app to scan email. If you don't know how to do that, please contact one of us. We will be more than happy to walk you through it. Or you can send a picture through Messenger. And another option is if you drop it off at our WASA office. So there is an outdoor mailbox on the side entrance. Make sure you put your name. So name on the work that you submit. Or you can knock on our door and someone will take your assignments or key questions from you. Or if you have any other questions, we will be more than happy to answer them for you. Okay, so we just went through this already. Again, click the subscribe button so that you can access the WASA classes on our WASA Distance Education Center YouTube. And as I mentioned, if you don't have internet or Wi-Fi, we can download the classes for you on a flash drive. You just need a USB port. You can click, open the lesson, and then listen or view classes. When you register with us, make sure that you give us a contact info. So whether it's a phone number or it's a Facebook profile, or if you want, we can give you an nnecschools.org email. If you already have one and you can't access it for some reason, maybe you forgot your password, let us know. We can reset it. Or if you tried everything else and you still can't get in there, let us know. We can reactivate it or reset it. The first thing that you could try is always sign out of all accounts, because sometimes without realizing it, you may be signed in to one of your accounts, and that's why it won't allow you to sign up or sign in. So make sure you sign out, and then you can add your new account, which is the nnecschools.org. So PLAR students this year, or I guess beginning the fall of last year, instead of doing the key questions from the lessons, you now have the option of doing just that, doing the key questions from the lessons, or going straight to the culminating. So if you choose to complete the key questions, then you have to have all the lessons, so lessons 1 to 5 for PLAR Science, and then you would send them out to me. So you just send out the key questions. You don't need to send back the lessons. You will need the lessons if you would like to review the work or the information that we have gone over. If you have previous versions of these lessons, so for example, if you have the 20, 23, 24, I will still accept the submitted work. So let's say you completed as far as lesson 2 from the 23-24 version. If you like, you can continue on with the 3 to 5 of that format, or you can request your DEC to give you the version for 24-25. It's up to you. The other option is you can choose to take the culminating activity. Okay, it's also it's like a test, except it's an open book. And the same thing. So even if you have already finished a lesson, so going back, if you have finished up to lesson 2 in PLAR Science and you decide maybe I should try the culminating, it won't hurt you to try it, then just ask for the culminating activity. So the culminating activity can be sent to the DEC. So I can email it to the DEC, they can print it off and give it to you, or I can email it directly to you. Okay, I will let your DEC know that I have given you the culminating activity. You do not need supervision. So in the previous years, you had to write the test in the learning center. You have to have so many hours to do it. You can't take it home. So not anymore. You can take the culminating activity home to complete, and you don't have a set time. However, we do encourage students not to keep it for a long period of time. So if you get it, try to complete it as soon as you can. That way you can get your equivalent credits faster. So successful students means receiving 50% and above the culminating activity. So if you don't get that, then the key questions in the lessons must be completed. So let's say in PLAR science, you didn't get 50% because you didn't do well in the chemistry section or chemistry and physics section, for example. So I will get you to do those lessons, and then I will get you to attempt the culminating activity again. So students are permitted several times to pass the culminating activity. If you're still not sure, you can ask for a sample test so that you can review the format of the culminating activity. So those are available for all the PLAR courses or subjects. So for English and math, you can contact Bonnie to get the format, or sorry, the sample test. So this is what it looks like. This is the mark sheet. So this is what it looks like. So it shows you that there are 5 parts to the culminating activity. That means you read a section on chemistry. Then after you read that section, then you will be asked questions. Same thing for biology, astronomy, physics, and environmental science. So it's worth a try, especially for those students that may only have 2 subjects to do. So you might only have the PLAR history and science to complete. Try the culminating activity. Okay, well, it doesn't hurt to try it. Okay, we're going to finish lesson 4 this morning. So we did lightning and lightning safety rules on Monday, and we started with what is an electric current on page 9, and we did some common electrical symbols and dry cells. So the last section we're doing this morning for lesson 4 is current, electricity, amperes, volts, and ohms on page 12. So last class we discussed how lightning forms as an example of static electricity. So lightning happens when negative charges build up in a cloud and then jump to the ground on another cloud, and it creates a big spark of energy, and we see it as lightning. We also learned about electric current in the parts of a dry cell on page 9. So when electrons move, they carry electrical energy from one place to another. The flow of electrons is called an electric current or current electricity. A lightning bolt is a natural example of an electric current. Electric currents also power everyday devices. Then we looked at 2 types. One was AC, alternating current. Now that type of electric current is where you have the flow of electrons that constantly changes direction. So when you think about alternating, so you go from one direction and then it goes the other way, so alternating. For example, the electricity from wall outlets, that is an example of an alternating current. So when you plug in your laptop or your hair dryer, you're using alternating current. Direct current, so these electrons move in one direction only. That's why it's called direct, because it's going in one direction. An example of direct current, these are like in batteries. So it just goes in one direction. Okay, the last topic, amperes, volts, and ohms on page 12. And again, keep in mind, learning goals for this lesson, I can describe the similarities and differences between current and static electricity. Okay, so if you're following along, page 13 of your lesson book. So the heading says amperes, volts, and ohms. When I talk about headings, it's like the title of that section. So if you're working on key questions and you see that it has volts and ohms in the key question, then you know that you should look for that heading. That means everything underneath that heading is talking about amperes, volts, and ohms. So just like we measure temperature in degrees, so for example, temperature right now is minus 15 degrees Celsius. Okay, so we have the symbol, that little 0 at the top. The minus is also a symbol. Okay, C is also a symbol that tells us that it's Celsius. So for temperature, we use degrees. For time, we do it in minutes or hours, and for length in meters or centimeters. So same thing with electricity. It has its own units of measurement. So the three most important units for measuring electricity are ampere, volt, and ohm. These units will help us understand and measure different aspects of electricity. So first off is amperes. So amperes measure the size of an electric current. So if you're looking at the picture on the bottom of the slide, you see the yellow, it's not a stick figure, it's a picture of it's a drawing actually, and his shirt has the word volt on it. The one on the top, who's wearing a hat, has the word ohm on his hat, and then the picture or the drawing of amp is the one that's trying to get through this hole or space. Okay, so keep that picture in mind. So that one that's green has the word amp on his shirt. So that is the size of the electric current. Okay, so he's trying to get through that gap. So the size of an electric current will depend on how many electrons pass a point in a circuit every second. So the more electrons that move through, the bigger the current. If fewer electrons pass through, the current is smaller. So an ampere is simply a unit used to measure the flow of electric current. That might be easier to visualize if you think about the hose and the water. So if you think about a garden hose, the amps is the actual current flow. So you can see that the water that's coming out of that garden hose, it's fairly good. But what happens if you stepped or you kink that hose? Okay, the flow of the water will be affected. Okay, so that will affect the amp. So this is what's happening here. That's why he can't get through, because someone is preventing him from getting through that gap. Okay, and that's that particular picture there, ohms, he's resisting it. Okay, he's putting resistance on that. So just like things, we need a force to move. Electricity also needs a force to make it flow. So again, think of the water. This force pushes the electrons through a circuit. So now we're looking at voltage. So that's the yellow picture Okay, so now he's the one that's pushing, he's trying to help amp to get through that gap. So this force pushes the electrons through a circuit. Voltage is like the pressure in a water hose. So just as water pressure moves the water, voltage pushes the electrons through a conductor. So the force that pushes the electrons is what's called an electromotive force, or for short we can just say EMF. And we measure the strength of this force in volts. So remember I said earlier that so the flow of the water, okay, was good on the first picture. So think of the volt as the pressure of the water. So if there's not much water pressure, look how much water is coming out of the hose. Now if you covered part of the flow of the water, you notice that you can make the flow go farther. Okay, so you're putting pressure on it, so it's pushing it. Okay, that's the volt. And finally we have ohms. So ohms measure how much a material resists the flow of electrons. So for example, a wire can resist the movement of electrons, and the level of that resistance is measured in ohms. So you can see amps, volts, and ohms, they're all connected together. So if one changes, then the others will also change in a certain way. So to figure out how these changes work, we use a rule called Ohm's law. Okay, and again, you don't have to memorize this. This is just a brief explanation what Ohm's law means. It's just a simple rule that explains how voltage, current, and resistance are all related in a circuit. So it says that voltage, V, equals current, L, times resistance, which is R. So in other words, the voltage in a circuit is equal to the current, or the flow of electrons. Then you multiply it by the resistance. That means how hard it is for the electrons to move. So think of it this way. If you increase the resistance, then you're going to need more voltage to keep the same current. That's like if you're pushing a wheelbarrow and it's full of rocks, you're going to need more voltage or force to move it. If you increase the current, you're going to need more voltage to push the electrons through. So this law helps us understand how these three things work together in electrical circuits. Okay, so they're all related. Okay, the last section is using electricity safely. So machines that run by electricity make life easier, we know that, but any machine or tool run by electricity must be used safely, which means electricity can be dangerous. You can get an electrical shock. So people should take care when using electric outlets. Outlets are meant for plugging in electric cords only. Never put anything else into an electric outlet. An object put into an outlet can carry electricity. So remember we talked about conductors. Water is a good conductor of electricity. Keep in mind to keep electric appliances away from water. So for example, never wash or bathe with a hair dryer near you. If the appliance fell into the water, the electric shock could kill you instantly. So there's a picture of a child there, and she's carrying a what do you call that? Screwdriver. Okay, so that's why some people put in electric covers. So if you have small children, so the electric covers or electric outlet covers, what they do is they close off those holes so that they can't put anything in there. It could be a fork, for example, like a metal fork. Okay, metal is a good conductor of electricity. Also, when cleaning or fixing an appliance, for example, if you're trying to clean your toaster, make sure you unplug it before you stick a knife in there. An appliance that is still plugged in can give a bad shock. Okay, so here's, I think this is in your book as well. Okay, never touch anything electrical with wet hands or while standing in water. If you have cords that are frayed, so frayed or broken, or plugs that are missing a prong, okay, don't use them. And we talked about keeping metal objects such as silverware away from plugs. Don't overload sockets. Pull by the plug, so that means you pull from the plug part, not the cord, because that's one way to keep it from fraying. And then don't run cords under rugs or furniture. Okay, then we can finish with key questions 67, 70 to 71. Now, key question 67, that was the matching the electrical terms to the corresponding description. So the reason that we're going back to this key question is because amperes, ohms, and EMF, okay, we didn't cover that until now. So these three are what's left to do. So number 1, EMF, number 5, amperes, number 7 is ohms. So EMF, that one's easy. Okay, so look at the 3 that's left, or what you can do is look at what you haven't answered yet. And maybe you know it already. So number 1, EMF is we haven't used G. The name for the force or pressure that pushes electrons, okay, is EMF. And we know that is number 1. Or if you're doing it this way, it's the letter G. Number 3, volts. So volts is the strength of the EMF is measured in volts. So that is number 3. So that would be J for number 3. Number 5, amperes. Okay, amperes, the size of an electric current is measured in amperes. So that is number 5. That's D. So there you have it. So key question 67 is finished. We did 69. That's regarding Benjamin Franklin, where he flew a kite. And then the last 2 questions, 70 and 71. So here we're looking at pictures of a circuit. So it's asking you, okay, there's a light bulb, there's a wire, and there's a battery or a dry cell. Okay, so we'll just label these. So dry cell, there's the light or light bulb. And you see the wire. So these are the wire. So look how it's all connected. Is the circuit complete or incomplete? This thing here is what we call the switch. And you notice the switch is up. So we know that the circuit is not complete. Okay, so it's incomplete. Are electrons moving? Well, when you have an open circuit, that means there's a break or a gap. That means the electrons are not moving. And you can notice that the light bulb is not lit up. So does the light bulb light up? The answer is no. Now look at the difference between that key question and then the following key question 71. Look at the diagram again. Notice the difference between the switch on key question 70, where it's up. This time the switch is down. So is the circuit complete or incomplete? We know it's completed. That means there's no gap or a break. Are electrons moving? Yes, we know that because look at the light. So the light bulb is lit. So yes. Okay, so this is the end of lesson 4. And what we're going to do now is we're going to begin with lesson 5, which is the last lesson for PLAR science. Okay, so I'm just going to close key questions for lesson 4, and then we can move on to our next topic or next lesson, which is environmental science. In environmental science, key questions 72 to 80, so that's the last key questions you will do if you're doing the key questions and lessons instead of the culminating. So only 9 key questions in lesson 5. Look at the cover page for lesson 5. All the information that you need there to get a hold of me is on that page. Here are the topics. The first topic is ecology on page 3. And then there's what is an ecosystem, also on page 3. Then we will look at biotic components and abiotic components on page 4. These are the terminology that you should keep in mind for environmental science. Carrying capacity, page 5, and relationships between organisms. We'll also look at food chains and food webs on page 6. On page 7, ecotones, biodiversity, energy in ecosystems, energy flow in an ecosystem, and photosynthesis, which we looked at in lesson 2. So some of these terms may be already familiar to you. And then on pages 8 to 9, you can read the key terms. That means all the terms and their definitions will be on that page. So let's see how far we get into lesson 5. So it shows you here key questions with the definition of the terms beginning on 72, and then the last key question will be about pesticides. Support questions, same thing for lessons 1 to 4. They are for practice only. Answers are at the end of this lesson, so that means you don't have to submit them for marking. You can do them, then you can check to see if you have gotten the questions right, but you don't have to submit them to me. Okay, you can check yourself for the answers at the end of the lesson. Okay, learning goals. I can describe different components of an ecosystem, and I can explain the dangers of global warming. So these are two things to keep in mind when we're working on lesson 5. Introduction. For environmental science, this is the study of the natural world around us. So we know that Canada is a huge country with many different types of ecosystems. It has forests, lakes, mountains. So it's important to understand how these ecosystems work so that we can see how human activities, so the things that we do, can affect them. In this lesson, you'll learn about ecology, which means how living things interact with their environment, ecosystems, and why biodiversity, meaning the variety of different plants and animals, is also important. Okay, the first term, ecology. So we said that already. It's the study of how living things interact with their environment and with each other. So it combines ideas from different subjects like biology, which is the study of living things. We just did chemistry, which is the study of substances. And then if you did the PLAR geography, geography is the study of the earth. Ecologists These are scientists who study how living things interact with each other. So you have ecology, which is studying how living things interact. Ecologists are the ones who study. So these are people who study how living things interact with each other and their environment. So what are they interested in? Well, they are interested in how organisms live, interact, and adapt to their surroundings. How materials and energy move through living communities. They're also interested in how ecosystems grow and change over time. And they're also interested in how biodiversity works in different environments. So ecology also looks at how humans affect and interact with the environment. So it could be things like the interactions between non-living and living components in the environment. So light, water, wind, nutrients in soil, heat, atmosphere. So these are non-living, living plants, animals. Okay. So they're interested in how we interact with those things. Okay, you can underline ecosystem in your book. So if you're following along in lesson 5, the word ecosystem, you can find that on page 3. So an ecosystem is a community of different living organisms that interact with non-living parts of their environment, like air, water, and soil. Ecosystems have 2 main parts. So the first part in an ecosystem are biotic components. So these are the living things, like plants, animals, insects, bacteria, fungi, and then abiotic. So these are the non-living things: temperature, light, water, air, and minerals in the soil. So here you can see an ecosystem. Okay, it's a picture of a pond or a lake. So you have a community of living organisms that's interacting with each other in their non-living environment. So you can see animals, so you can see a deer, you can see a frog, turtles. There's fish. You also see water, plants, grass. You can see a log. Okay, you can't see it, but there's air, there's temperature, there's light. So if we were to group them, the non-living things, sun, rocks, and soil in that picture, the living things there, plants, animals, bacteria. Okay, so ecosystems are defined by how living things are interacting with their environment, and they can be different sizes. So some scientists even believe that the whole planet is one big ecosystem. So in ecosystems, you have energy and nutrients moving from one organism to another. For example, an animal that eats plants gets energy and nutrients from the plants. Most of the energy in an ecosystem comes from the sun, but there are some ecosystems, like those found in sealed caves, where energy comes from other sources. Biotic components. So we talked about biotic components are living things that make up an ecosystem. This includes organisms, their parts, how they interact, and their waste. So things like parasitism, that's where you have one organism harms another by living on it. Disease and predation, that means when one animal eats another. These are also considered biotic factors. So for example, parasitism, so you might have a dog who has fleas. Okay, the flea is the parasite because it's living off the dog. So there are different categories of biotic components or organisms, including producers or autotrophs. So these are organisms like plants that use sunlight to make their own food. That's why they're called producers. They produce or create. So they make food through photosynthesis. Okay, so you know that we're not producers. We are consumers or heterotrophs. So these are organisms like animals that rely on plants and other animals for food. So hetero, so when you see heterotroph, hetero means others and troph means nutrients. So we're getting nutrients from others. Because we cannot make our own food, and we have to eat other living organisms. Decomposers or detritivores, these organisms like fungi and bacteria that break down dead plants and animals into simpler chemicals, which can be used again in the ecosystems. So decomposers, they eat dead stuff. So they eat dead plants, dead animals, and animal waste. There are many types like bacteria, fungi, animals, so like insects, worms. And they thrive in warm, moist environments. So if you look at, we're going to look at the food chain next, you can see that the decomposers, okay, are at the bottom, okay, of the food chain. Okay, next up, abiotic components. So the non-living parts of an ecosystem are called abiotic components or abiotic factors. So these are the things that can affect how many animals and plants live in an area and whether they can grow and reproduce. So some examples of abiotic components are water, light, temperature, humidity, air, chemicals in the environment, and soil. So here you can see a picture. So you can see the biotic components, the living things. So let's look at the fox, for example. So he is the fox. Okay, depends on some of the things here. Temperature. So if it gets too cold, okay, that will affect how he is able to move or find food. So abiotic factors can change in the environment and influence which organisms live there and how many of them there are. The things that limit how many and what types of organisms can live in an ecosystem are called limiting factors. So many limiting factors control the growth of populations in nature. So here's an example. The cold temperatures in the Arctic limit the growth of trees because the ground is permanently frozen. So if it limits the trees, that means if certain animals depend on the food that comes from the trees, then their food supply is limited. Okay, here's another one. A limiting factor, like I said, is an environmental factor, or it could be a variable that has the capacity to restrict the growth, abundance, or distribution of a population in an ecosystem. So here's another example of a limiting factor. It's for plant growth. So the amount of available sunlight, water, and nutrients that are essential in photosynthesis. So that plant is depending on those things for it to grow. Okay, carrying capacity is the highest number of organisms that an ecosystem's resources can support. The carrying capacity is limited by both the available abiotic factors like water and temperature and biotic factors like food and space, as well as the ability of the ecosystem to recycle the remains of dead organisms through bacteria and fungi. So here's a good example of carrying capacity. You have 2 fish bowls. So one fish bowl has 3 fish in there. Okay, they have room to swim, they have food, they have water, And then look at the other fish bowl. It's packed with other fish. So there's not much space for them to move around. There's not enough water. The water actually overflowed, and you can see some of the fish fell out. Okay, not enough air. So that's what happened to the fishbowl on the left. Okay, so their survival is dependent on the water, the food, and the space. So in short, carrying capacity just means the maximum of individuals in a species that an environment can support in the long term. You can actually watch carrying capacity on YouTube. I think I gave you the link. Okay, so you can do that on your own. Okay, so carrying capacity, if you're following along, that was on page 5. Relationships between organisms. So still on page 5. So organisms don't live alone. They usually live in groups with others of the same species. So all the members of the same species living in the same place, like a pond, are called a population. So here you have a frog, and a frog is an organism. And then here you have a pond, and it's populated, or it also has more than one frog. So let's see if you can count them all. Oh, there's too many to count. So now you have a population of frogs. Since there are usually many different species in an ecosystem, there are also many different populations. So you can't see, you might have a duck population, mosquitoes, snails, fish. So all the populations of different species living together in one place make up community. So you have organism, you have population, now you have community. So just like the community you live in, having different people, a pond community might include, like I just said, frogs, toads, mosquitoes, algae, among others. Okay, so I'm just going to give you an introduction here of the lesson 5 key questions. Just take a moment to open it up. So very similar to all your other key questions from lessons 1 to 4. You have the choice of doing the key questions from the lessons, or you can choose to take the culminating activity. Like I said, you might have finished up to lesson 4 key questions, and then you decide, hey, I want to try the culminating. That's fine. You just let me know. So the key questions will help you review important concepts and prepare for the culminating, while the culminating will assess or test your overall understanding of the material that's covered in the course. Okay, so again, you have to choose. You can choose whether you do the key questions or the culminating. Okay, do what you think is best for you. Again, like the other lessons 1 to 4, you do not need to use the internet or Wi-Fi to look for answers. Okay, it's all in the lessons. Some of it you may already know. So in key question 72, some of the terms we've covered already. So we looked at the term ecology, we looked at ecosystem, we looked at biotic components, abiotic components, we looked at consumer, producer. Let's see what else we looked at there. So, and also photosynthesis. So there were only 2 that we didn't look at, which is ecotone and bioamplification. Oh, and also habitat. So 3. So you can start with this key question 72, What you're doing here is you don't even have to define it, you have to match the environmental terms to the corresponding description. So we can try the first one, which is ecology. Okay, and if you look at the description on the right, we know that ecology is the study of the interaction of living things with each other and with the abiotic, non-living factors in their environment. So you simply put E, okay, beside number 1, or you could also write ecology. Okay, whichever way. You just have to match it. Number 2, for ecosystem. Okay, we'll just do this one. Ecosystem is, again, read the description, is C. It's the set of relationships between populations of species and between those populations and the abiotic, non-living factors in their environment. So that is C. Okay, so that's, we'll stop here, and then we will pick this up again on Monday, which again is week 9.